Yep, you guys ready? I'd like to go ahead and call this meeting. This is our regular meeting, Destin City Council on June 4th, 2018. And tonight we'll start with our invocation of Reverend Kim Cannon from Destin United Methodist Church. All stand, please.
Let us pray. Father God, thank you so much for a beautiful day. Thank you for being a good Father who gives good gifts. Thank you for life and health and strength, for your mercy on us and for a beautiful city. I pray tonight for these who lead our city, that you would give them wisdom, direction, help them to lead us well, to do right, to show mercy, to walk humbly with the Lord. We give you thanks and praise for hearing and for answering, because we pray it in the name of Christ. Amen.
I'd like to thank everyone for coming tonight, for those of you that are on video. I just would like to remind everyone to fill out a blue speaker card if you'd like to speak about items on the agenda. Other than items listed under public hearing, you'll have an opportunity to speak there as well. You'll have 3 minutes to make your comments, and you can fill out as many cards on as many of tonight's agenda items that you would like to speak about. You can also fill out a yellow card to speak about any item not on the agenda that concerns you and you'd like for the council to hear. You can fill out more than one card for each distinct separate issue that you have, so it gives you plenty of opportunity to speak of your concerns. You'll have 3 minutes to speak on each individual issue. The intent of the changes that we made with the council approval was to increase your access to speak to this council on issues on and off the agenda. We moved this access to speak to the beginning of the meeting to provide everyone a chance to share their concerns, even if they cannot stay for the duration of the meeting. This allows you to address any work or family needs, and you can't stay to the very end. It also lets the council know your thoughts and positions on issues prior to any motions, discussions, and votes as we move through the legislative portion of our meeting. I kindly remind the speakers to give their name and address when they speak, address the council and the chair as a whole. Please do not address or name individual council members when making your comments. If your time has come to an end, I will politely ask you to wrap up your thoughts in 15 or 30 seconds. I kindly want to remind our council members that this is the public's opportunity to speak, and I encourage all of us to take notes and listen. This is not a time for debate or bantering with public speakers. I will, however, recognize any council member if they wish to ask questions for clarification from any of the speakers after their 3-minute comment has expired. I just ask the council members respectfully to use it for questioning only. That being said, let's move on. And we'll begin with the approval of the minutes.
Have y'all approved the agenda yet, too?
Okay, yeah, agenda approval, excuse me.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion. We have a second. Seeing no discussion. Unanimous. Ayes have it. The agenda has been approved. First item is approval of the minutes, May 21st, 2018.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Let me clear the thing for everybody. All right. The vote is unanimous. Ayes have it. So moved. Tonight, we don't have any proclamation, so I don't have to get up there and make a speech. So I think what we'll do is we'll move right forward to Mr. Pleat. Would you like to approach the
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. Good to see you again. It's been quite a while. And good evening, members of the council, council to the city, Mr. Jeff Burns, city manager, and Ms. Kopp. My name is David Pleat. I represent Dieter Blossbichler and his companion company, which is Trash Ship Holdings AG, an Austrian company. They own adjacent parcels on what is called the Sea Oats parcel on Old 98. I'm also here today with members of DAG, Charlie Clary and Pat Balish. I will tell you that DAG and my firm were part of the original Tier 3 team, along with Mr. Blossbichler on behalf of his interest 10 years ago now it is, when this first came to the City Council at the time. I'm here to request grandfather status under Policy 1-2.1.5 of the Comprehensive Plan. I'm quick to note that I understand this provision is not one to be cavalierly utilized. It should be infrequently rather than frequently considered because of its very nature, asking for a special exception to the application of the code as it moves forward. I'm hoping that I can be persuasive here today that this particular case regarding Mr. Blossbichler is one of those unique circumstances that warrants a discussion of the City Council and consideration of a grandfathering status of his Tier 3 project that was originally approved in 2006. The project itself began in May of 2004 with a final development order, the original order in this case, which was a Tier 1 approval. This was on May 2nd, 2005. At that time, it was approved as a 4-story, 64-unit, 50-foot tall project. I have a picture here. I hope all of you can see it. It's a little juxtaposed on the big screen. But all at the time, I will tell you, thought it was going to be a beautiful project. And while later I'll explain under Tier 3, it could be 144 units, when my client came back in March of 2008, I said 6 before, it was 2008, to seek a Tier 3 designation, my client was seeking at the time a Tier 3 designation allowing for the project to go to 80 units, 5 stories, 60 feet. So an increase of 16 units and 10 feet in 1 story. As all of you are probably familiar, the Tier 3 process is an arduous process. I can remember that night, it was a long night here when this was argued back in February of 2008, which was finally approved. I think Mayor Barker was the deciding vote on that evening. One reason I ask you to consider Mr. Blossbichler's case is because the unique class of 1 that constitutes the Sea Oats property. As far as I can tell, there were 2 Tier 3 projects approved back in this time frame of 2008. Of the 2, there's only 1 that went ahead and went forward with conferred benefit to the city without having the project come out of the ground and go to sale and realize a profit. Of course, we all know what happened in 2008, 9, 10, and beyond. The recession hit, the oil spill hit, it completely collapsed our real estate market, and it also collapsed the value of this property and the interest in the development of the property at the time. Fortunately, our economy is starting to rebound, and there's renewed interest in the possibility of developing this particular parcel. Again, it was seeking 1 more story and an additional 16 units. The conferred benefit that was already provided to the city were 2 things. One is the Tarpon Street public access, which is a beautiful public access. It has a bench, it has the shower facilities, and it opens up to a wide open piece of beautiful beach. And I will tell you that Mr. Blossbichler, in the operation of Sea Oats, is not an owner that vigilantly every day is out there policing his parcel, making sure nobody's on his dry sand. It's quite the opposite. There's unfettered use of the sand by the public, and that's by design. He feels there's plenty of space for both the patrons of Sea Oats and the public as they come to use that property. I have a couple more slides of the walkway itself. You can see the beach. This was taken not too long ago. In addition, my client funded the development of 5 parking spots on Tarpon for the use by the public. So not only is there a public access point, a 5-foot easement to the shore, along with a walkway that was constructed, there's also available parking for the public that was paid for by the property owner. That's another shot of the lots there where the parking spots are. And if you can change that, Doug, I'd appreciate it. There was an estimate of the time of the actual cost of these conferred benefits. And keep in mind that along with those 2 benefits to the city as part of the Tier 3 approval, my client had to commit under the development order to Tier 3 enhancements, which include multimodal pathways, trolley stops, enhanced landscaping, pedestrian amenities, underground utilities, and more, all of which to make sure this would be a pristine and beautiful piece of development that would look good on Old 98. At the time, it was estimated that the easement to the beach, the construction for the boardwalk itself, would be estimated at $49,500. As it actually turns out, the actual figures came in a bit lower. The actual cost, and I have a breakdown of the cost if interested, was $37,648.81. The city agreed to pay part of that cost of the actual construction, not for the land itself, but for the construction of $23,419.87, which means that Mr. Blossbuckler, for the construction itself, funded $14,228.94. And please don't ask me how the city's portion came out to $23,419. I don't recall after all these years, but there was a method to that madness. Also, for the design of the parking and construction of the parking, there's a total of $53,500 in expenses for that. And then most significantly is the value of the land, which is somewhat difficult to assess at any given moment in time. I will tell you the minutes that go back to that time period, the city minutes, reflect that the city acknowledged a $350,000 value to the easement to the land itself. I think one could argue easily it's worth even more because of the extremely positive benefit to the city. The property value at the time was significant. It was overall property value at the time valued at, bear with me one moment, what currently is $32,000 per square foot, back then was almost $65,000 per square beachfront, I should say, beachfront foot. And the 2 parcels combined are 700 feet worth of beachfront. What my client is asking is that the City Council consider the unique status of Mr. Blossbuckler and this conferred benefit that's been going on for almost 10 years now. The easement itself was recorded in '06, so while the walkway was not constructed in '06, the easement itself was recorded in '06. So I am sensitive to the concerns the city would have that, well, if we grant this, Mr. Pleat, for your client, then we might have an avalanche of people coming in and saying, well, I want to be grandfathered in too before the comp plan changes. And I think the obvious distinction here is what I've made, which is there's already been a great good faith effort on the part of Mr. Blossbuckler to go ahead and go forward with the development agreement in this case, conferring the benefit to the city. And he did so willingly and understanding that it wasn't developed at that time. The additional benefits on that chart you can see from a Tier 3 project that was the Coretta Dunes project is estimated in over $2 million worth of enhanced benefits under the Tier 3 structure. And while the Tier 3 would allow up to 144 units, only 80 was sought, and my client's more than willing, as a condition of any grandfathering, to restrict any Tier 3 construction in the future to 80 units, not 144 under the current code. And I also am mindful that if he were to develop that property, it still must be reviewed for consistency with the existing comp plan. It's not like there's a rubber stamp and he gets to build credit dunes under the old plans. He still will have to resubmit that through his engineering team for consistency with the current comp plan. This is a unique situation. I am here asking on behalf of my client that you grandfather his Tier 3 status so that when the effective changes happen in the comp plan, which would take away a story and 16 to 20 units, which even under current valuation, which is less than it was years ago, is many millions of dollars of lost opportunity there. And I know that's not a consideration for the city council, the economic cost to the particular property owner, but it's a modest request, respectfully, considering what could be requested and could have been requested at the time under the Tier 3. So I respectfully ask that you consider, through motion and second and discussion and ultimate vote, the request of my client for grandfathered vested right status under the cited section. And I'm glad to answer any questions you might have, and also the DAG representatives, if you have any technical questions, are here as well.
Thank you, Mr. Pleat. Mr. Destin.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor and council, I was looking at, I want to resist the urge to delve into the merits at this time. I think it may be, it may behoove us, and I'll listen to whatever comments the rest of the council has, but maybe if we tabled this for indefinitely into the future so that we can, I know that in a few more agenda items, we're going to start talking about a vested rights determination discussion that might put together a rubric or a procedure under which we would have a much more formalized process for us to even have this discussion that we may end up having, and I think that might be a more formalized and fruitful procedure if we can get to it. It's just that you gave your presentation before we got to put that rubric into place. I'll throw a motion out just to table, but of course I'll leave it to the rest of the council.
Second.
That ends that.
Well, not yet.
We have discussion?
Sure.
Do we have a date certain for tabling it, or?
No.
That's why I tabled it.
Ms. Ramflo.
Thank you. I actually have a few questions about the benefits that you discussed.
Okay.
When I go back and look at it, it looks like there's 3 primary benefits that were brought forward to us: the easement, the parking, and the walkover.
Correct. That is correct.
Okay. So when I look at the easement, I go back and look through the minutes, I see that there were actually 6 access points, and that it was going to be reduced to 2 with the building of the development. And so this actual easement that was deeded to the city was a relocation of one that was in the middle. Is that correct?
There actually was a entry point between the 2 parcels that obviously, if you built a building, would have to be around that to provide access. The access point on the westernmost side of the parcels, I'm sorry, the easternmost side, that's a Kokomo Cove easement. And then the Tarpon Street is the 5-foot easement that the public currently enjoys. The previous easement was not improved, and frankly was not accessible because of the location of the existing older buildings.
So, but there were 6 different ways of entering at some point. It was reduced to 2, and one of the main ones was moved to the western boundary, which is Tarpon.
As it relates to public access, I think it was 1. I don't think it was 6.
Okay, I was just going through the minutes, and
Yeah.
it said 6 access points, so.
There were other access points for patrons of Sea Oats and for the building owners on the trash head parcel.
Okay, now, the parking, I actually was going through and looking at the minutes, and it's interesting because Commissioner Wines is actually here tonight. I think I saw, there he is. And I see that back at that time, he had brought forward the concern that parking was actually going to force feed people into a small area, and that it was going to be more of a liability than a benefit. And I was wondering, I didn't see any further discussion on that. How did the conversation go, or were there further conversations regarding the potential for the parking being added actually not being a benefit but a negative?
I think, are you referring to the public's access to parking near the Tarpon Street access point?
The 5 parking spaces that were going to be one of the benefits?
Right, there's 5 spaces there. Also, there are public spaces that run parallel at that intersection that he did not pay for the paving of that, but there are also public parking spots there. So there's 2 places to park. And of course, if the development was completed, there would be additional enhancements under that project that would allow for multimodal, for pedestrian trolley stop, other things considering the public's access as well.
Okay,
But
and then...
it wasn't an impediment to the approval. It was
Right.
considered, I think part of that was what I just said, that they knew under the actual order itself there'd be additional parking that would come from that.
And then the third piece, which was the walkover, I actually was on council back in 2015 when the walkover was brought forward to council, and Mr. Blasbickler was seeking reimbursement. And I note that the letter that was received by the city noted that the reason he wanted to go ahead and be reimbursed for this was because they were unable to get the project off the ground before the final deadline, which was March 28th, 2015. So we went ahead and the council agreed at a subsequent date to go ahead and reimburse Mr. Blasbickler the $23,000 something and change. But it appears, and it's said several times, that the development order was now void and null because it had completely expired. So how can you have a vested interest?
He would still have to go through the analysis, the review for consistency under the comp plan Tier 3 requirements moving forward if he's grandfathered in under the existing comp plan. And at the time, there was a series, I can't remember the number of years, but there were a series of extensions of a year each for the development order. Remember, there was some legislation that allowed that to happen during the downturn. Regrettably, some of his partners in that process and in the recession no longer had the wherewithal to continue. So there was a decision that this is not the best time to develop, wait for things to get better. But he would still have to go through a process with staff for approval under the current guidelines of a Tier 3. If the new comp plan goes into effect, he loses the opportunity to do that.
We no longer have a Tier 3, so there aren't any current guidelines for a Tier 3.
Well,
Right.
under the previous development order, he was approved at the 5 stories and the 60-foot and the 80 units, which is what we're asking for consideration of.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Ramsey, I'm going to make a point of order. Thank you for your questioning. Robert's Rules of Order, we weren't supposed to have a discussion because we had a motion and a second to table, and it's supposed to be just a vote. So thank you for your questions, and thank you, Mr. Pleat, for answering those questions. Hopefully, at a later date, when we solve some of these other issues, you'll get another opportunity to come before here. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and call for a vote on the motion and the second to table this. We have 5 ayes, 2 noes, motion carries.
Could I ask one follow-up question, if I could, just about, you referenced the rubric, the process, just so I can explain to my client, is it the intent then of the city to try to address this type of request through some procedure that currently is not in place?
Yeah, Mr. Pleat, if you'll notice, and we'll talk about it under the city manager's report on 4B, it's a vested rights determination discussion. We'll have that discussion if you'd like to stay for that portion of it, because that'll educate you on what we're talking about at that time. I thank you again.
All right, thank you.
Okay, at this point, we're going to have public comments on agenda items that are not public hearings. And Also, any other matters not on the agenda? This is a change. Like I said before, we used to do it two different public hearings or public comment periods. This time, you can, I'm going to go through the blue cards for public comment on items on the agenda, and then I don't have any yellow cards at this time, but I will make provision for anybody in the audience that would like to talk on anything that is not on tonight's agenda. And we'll start, I'm just going to take the cards as I got them. And the first speaker wants to speak on agenda item 4C, and it's Commissioner Graham. Would you like to approach the podium?
You got this hoobage, there we are. Well, good evening, everybody. Mr. Mayor, council members, staff, and our general counsel, and Madam City Manager, thank y'all for letting us come today. And I'm just here to speak very briefly on your resolution that's up today. And for our friends from where I come from up in the north end of the county, just want to say thank you for your support 2 weeks ago, I guess it was, for the support and resolution with the our road project up there. I am seeing and feeling very, very good about a resurgence in countywide cooperation, and this county, everybody realizing no matter where you work and live in the south end of the county or the north end of the county, that everybody crosses across that great thing we call the largest military base in the world. Whether they work or they play or they have construction projects in both ends, people are crossing back and forth every day up and down our roadway. So this is a great time, I think, to have your support. A lot of the great plans we have will be very, very difficult, if not impossible, if we don't come up with some new revenue. And as I said when I ran for office, trying to transition away from charging our residences that own property here, adding to the tax base on property, that we need to look at sales tax or other fair taxes. So we're going to have that item up on the ballot. We would appreciate very, very much y'all considering supporting us on this resolution. And I hope not only support us on the resolution, but in every method that's legal and lawful that we can do and y'all can share with the public the importance that we love our tourists just like we love our military, but it would be nice for them to pay a little bit more towards some programs that we need to do. You know, we had a great success this year. Y'all are very much aware of it. I know Councilman Ramswell, you're very familiar because you worked on the bill several years just like I did, and we finally got where we could use a little bit of our TDC monies to work on some of these transportation projects. I'm very happy that y'all have a very, very good commissioner out here that is really looking out for you, and glad we could start laying the predicate to spend some money out here on your connector, your crossroad connector, crosstown connector, and some other beach things. And we just want to see this continue. So I would just ask you to embrace us a little bit more and approve the resolution today and help us with this sales tax initiative. And I also have Mr. Hofstad here too, and I think he filled out a card, and if he wants to answer any questions about any of the technical stuff, you know, he can do that as well. But I just want to thank y'all for everything very much and appreciate your cooperation and a lot of these projects we've had going on in the last few months, because I think it's going to continue right on down the road. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. John, Mr. Halsford.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council, and to echo our Chairman Fountain's comments, we certainly appreciate you allowing us the opportunity to appeal to you tonight in support of a local option surtax initiative. As the chairman indicated, we have just a number of competing and pressing needs in this county. I feel like personally we've got a generational opportunity to leverage local dollars against Triumph dollars to get some much needed infrastructure completed in this county. But it's going to take leveraging local dollars to do that. And certainly our board's committed to that. I know you are as well, and certainly Our board stands in support of this council and this community and a number of initiatives, whether it's the Destin Crosstown Connector, whether it's beach renourishment, dredging East Pass, support from our TDD revenues to support your operation and maintenance of your beach-related facilities. Certainly, I think there's a renewed sense of cooperation between the Board of County Commissioners and this council, and we would certainly, Mayor, appreciate and Council appreciate your support moving forward. We have sought and received resolutions from all of the municipalities here in Okaloosa County, the Chambers of Commerce both in Destin and Fort Walton Beach, the Emerald Coast Association of Realtors, the EDC. I think everybody recognizes the importance of this funding source and a fair funding source. We're not having to leverage property taxes locally to accomplish all the needed work that needs to take place in this county. As many of you know, and I tell groups all the time that I speak to, there are 3 counties out of 67 in this state that have an aggregate millage below 4, and your county is one of them. We have not leveraged franchise fees or other sources of revenue. I think we're a model for doing more with less, but if you're going to tackle $100, $200 million transportation projects, it takes some local dollars to leverage for those projects. So with that, Mr. Mayor, Council, appreciate the time and appreciate any support.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Ms. Lee Moore.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Lee Moore, representing Howard Group. And I just wanted to, I'm also speaking on the sales tax item, and I just wanted to say that we at Howard Group, in general, are in support of this tax for the much-needed infrastructure around the county, and especially up in Crestview. We certainly think that this would be very beneficial to the entire county as well. And we also, with one thing being said, we typically do not support additional taxes without knowing what they will go to. So our request and suggestion is that for the city of Destin and the community and the citizens of Destin, that they know beforehand what these funds, additional funds, would be spent on to improve the city of Destin as well. And so that's the only caveat I would put in there. But we do think that this needs to happen, and hope that you will be able to support it. Thank you.
Next speaker is Mr. Robert Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members. I'm here on behalf of the Destin Chamber of Commerce. Our normal spokesperson, Mr. Moody's on vacation this week, so I got the pleasure of being here at City Council. To reiterate what Ms. Moore just brought to your attention, at the Destin Chamber, we did not get behind this effort until we had an idea of what the projects were going to be. And we've come up with 4 or 5 that we have shared with the county commissioners that we would like to see happen in the city of Destin. This has all been sent to each of you, I think, by email by Mr. Moody last week. If not, I'd like to reiterate what those 5 projects are. One is improvements to US 98 and Stallman Avenue intersection. 2, the installation of a traffic signal at the Commons Drive, Henderson Beach Drive intersection, as well as other improvements for traffic flow there. 3 is to add sidewalks for pedestrian safety along Commons Drive. And 4 would be improvements to drainage problems, also along Commons Drive. So all those projects are outside of the city of Destin, but within Destin, if you will. So the Chamber Board voted at its last meeting to support this resolution, and we think that the council should take that effort tonight. Thank you.
Mr. Perry, if...
Go ahead, Mr.
Did y'all get a dollar amount of the projects from the county?
We did not get a dollar amount.
Okay. Thanks.
We understand that over a 10-year period, there would be approximately $10 million coming.
Well, I know how much the city of Destin will receive from the
Right.
tax, but those
We
discretionary
did not get a commitment
projects-
from the county as to a specific
Okay.
dollar amount for those projects.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you again. The last blue card I have is Jennifer Green. And she's speaking on item 5A.
Is it on? Okay, Jennifer Green, I'm here representing Expedia, and good to see you all again. Expedia owns HomeAway and VRBO, so if you hear any of those, we're sort of all in the same pot. Wanted to say thank you for allowing us to attend your task force meetings. We appreciated being able to participate and listen to all of your discussions. We understand the disruption in neighborhoods. We get it. I last night went on several different platforms and put in different items or different things I was looking for, including occupancy in homes. And there's some really, really, really big homes. We get it. We see it. I've spent time in the area and totally understand where you all are coming from. I want to let you know that HomeAway is a full home rental advertiser. So the concept of hosted stays or having hosts or someone there, these are traditional vacation homes. And however you sort of cut the mustard on those, if someone is staying on a short-term basis, whether or not someone is there on the property or in a guest house outside, it doesn't really matter. The fact of the matter is you all are trying to preserve the integrity of the neighborhoods. In looking back through your proposed ordinance, and particularly the changes for this evening, we think that occupancy limits, licenses, and concerns about modifying entities or rooms after the certificate of operation or occupancy is done. Saw a lot of rooms with 8 bunk beds in a very small room. So get it, understand it. We do have concerns just about a couple items, and one is the responsible party residing within 30 miles. That's kind of an interesting concept. We think having a responsible party there to answer questions. If you have owners that are out of state, out of the area, 30 miles gets into, is it as the crow flies? Is it our Destin going down 98, 30 miles? But the question would be, what would be the result? And I think the answer is somewhat in your ordinance, and that is to actually evict tenants. So we want to be able to help you walk through some options on being able to do that without hamstringing or prohibiting individuals from actually renting their property because they don't know someone nearby. We also understand the issue of weddings and large events and advertising for those type of events, but keep in mind that one property could be listed for rent on 5 different advertising platforms. So while we're more than willing to help, at least I can tell you on behalf of those brands, there are other brands out there as well as Facebook, a website. So keep in mind, we're going to help. We have a Stay Neighborly program. We try to get everyone that advertises to include information that the city or the county requires, and to ensure that they're working with local government. I will tell you that we also, and we've mentioned this to your city manager, we're happy if you see something. I know you all are looking at websites and you see the houses. I can't imagine that you've driven by one of these houses and don't recognize one of them on the website. Please let us know. We're available. If there's a problem, please do, and we'd like to be able to address it versus you all continuing to be frustrated. We want you to have happy tourists and happy neighbors here. Happy to answer any questions.
Does anyone have any questions at this time? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, that takes care of all my blue cards, and nobody filled out a yellow card. So I'm assuming everyone else would rather chat during the public hearing process. Is there anyone in the audience who was remiss to fill out a yellow card or a blue card that would like to speak on an agenda item or any issue not on the agenda item? All right, seeing none, we will move from item number 3 and begin the city manager's report, 4A.
Yes, sir. The agent broker of record for our health and ancillary benefits has come up for renewal of contract. We put out a RFP, and the submissions were received on May 24th. The city bid committee has gone through all of the required processes, and what you have before you are the top-ranked submitters for your consideration. At this time, I would like to turn it over to our HR manager, Ms. Karen Jankowski, to walk you through the process and answer any questions that you may have.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I appreciate your time. Thank you for your introduction, City Manager. That was very well done. What we've done for you, the bid committee has given you the top 3 in alphabetical order for the agent broker of record. As you can see, there's a bio provided for all of those, as well as ranking sheet and cost summaries. So 2 of the firms are able to be here tonight, so if you have questions of those firms, Barton Fenstermaker, Tondela and Associates, as well as FBMC Benefits Management, Inc. I'd like to open it up if you have any questions of me or the firm at this time.
Nobody's pushed their button.
So at this, sorry, sir. At this point, what we can do, I have a ranking sheet if you'd like to rank them. 1 would be your first choice. 3, of course, would be your third choice. If we want to take a little break so I can tally those and then be able to kind of make a decision tonight, that would be great.
Skip, I'll get to you in just a second. I thought that the briefing materials was very, very, very well done. Long, very in-depth, but I'm sure that the council members did their homework on that. We may not need to do something like that. I'll let maybe if it pleases the council, we'll just make a motion, get a second, and have a discussion, and then maybe we'll actually vote on their preferred. Mr. Obadiah.
Yeah, that was going to be my question. I didn't know we were going to rank order anybody. I thought we were just going to take their recommendations and kind of use that as the means to get to this motion that I'll make if you want me to make the motion.
Make a motion, sir.
I would move council to authorize the city manager to enter into an agreement for agent broker of record with Barton, Fenstermaker, Tondela, and Associates as voted by council.
We have a motion. Can I have a second?
Second.
We have a second. Discussion. First up, looks like Mr. Obadiah.
The only reason I wanted to make the motion, and the reason is, I mean, it looks to me like they are easily the best choice because of their long continued relationship with us, and they've been ranked the highest amongst your board when you reevaluated them. So, and they're also the least expensive, and they're the closest. So I don't know why we wouldn't, approve them.
And I also noticed that just with the track record, all 3 of them were really good companies. But I concur with Mr. Obadiah that probably should be the first choice. I don't get to vote on this particular issue, but that would be my first choice. So seeing no further discussion, we have a motion and a second. So let's go ahead and cast our votes. It is unanimous. Ayes have it.
Thank you again. I appreciate it.
That was pretty easy. Next one may be a little longer. Item 4B, vested rights determination discussion. And we have I had the city manager give everyone a handout that included the language in the old comp plan and still exist. And then the proposed revised language. And we'll go ahead and I think
Mayor,
To stay with the rules before we do a motion, I'd like for the city manager and the city attorney both to make some inputs on this.
Yes, sir. I'll go ahead and introduce the item. Our land use attorney, Kimberly Kopp, worked very closely with me on putting this item together. And currently, as you have before you, as the mayor had mentioned, is our current grandfather clause, policy 1-2.1-5 in our comprehensive plan, and it states that existing land uses that were lawfully conforming uses prior to the effective date of the comprehensive plan shall continue as lawful uses and shall be regulated through administrative remedies for vested rights issues that shall be included in the Land Development Code. Well, currently, there are no existing administrative processes in our Land Development Code. So what we're looking for tonight is policy direction from the council in order for us to establish an administrative process and criteria for future vesting right determinations. It's not something that your staff or city manager is comfortable making subjective decisions on vesting rights. We would like the input from the council and the policies for process and criteria as to what should or should not be considered a vesting determination. And then once we've gone through that process, bring it back to council for the final discussion and decision. So what we've put together is the backup is the original grandfather clause that was created by the land use attorney for the comprehensive plan. We're bringing that forward for your consideration. If this is something that the council would like to direct staff to bring back for a first reading, if there are changes or tweaks that you would like to make to that language, we brought it forward so that you have a point of reference from which to start, but staff would greatly appreciate and recommend a process and criteria to make vesting right determinations in the future. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, City Manager. Jeff?
If the council is wanting to give any developers vested rights in the future, it does make sense to probably put something in the Code of Ordinances. My only input would be, you did a very good job on this, Kim. I think originally I would like to take a stab at maybe taking what Kim put together and come back in 2 weeks for y'all to look at it and maybe come up with something just, and I hate to say it's but a little simpler, a little more black and white, if that's the direction y'all want to go in, and then staff could take that and Kim could take it and tear it apart. But I think it's very well written, but it's more, this is more appropriate for like a comp plan amendment as opposed to something I think y'all might be more interested in, which is something very simple that y'all can make a decision from.
Thank you, Mr. Burns. I'm going to ask a question of the city manager, and then I'll recognize Mr. Destin and then Mr. Braden second. Basically, the existing language is just real broad-based and extremely vague. So basically what you're saying is that this language here will just establish a process, criteria, and procedure, and then in the end, it all comes back to the council for the council to evaluate any vested right issue after you and the staff using these processes, criteria, and procedures, bring it back before the council. Council has the final say. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, that is correct. And the language that was prepared by Kimberly Kopp is based in concept on the Burt-Harris Act. So if a property owner or developer wishes to come forward and request a vesting based upon the previous comp plans, they would have the burden of proof of showing that their criteria leads to a somehow inequity or unfairness on the part of not being allowed to continue or to develop under a previous comp plan. we staff feel that what Ms. Kopp has put together with this grandfather clause is not necessarily complicated, but it gives enough information to staff to bring forward a report to council that would allow you to make the policy decision on whether or not they have met the criteria that would then invoke a vesting determination on that property or development.
In short, it puts all the burden on the requester and not so much on the council.
Yes, sir, that is correct.
Thank you very much for that clarification. First up, Mr. Destin.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I've always had the first couple iterations of this, I had a bit of apprehension on what the avalanche of applications may be in the future, and that was some of my leeriness. But I think if we can come up with a rubric with Jeff's help and Kim's input, something that basically has a sunset provision too, that maybe 6 to 12 months, whatever the case law supports. Yeah, we need to make sure that this just doesn't goes out into perpetuity, and likewise we don't put something into effect that's so vague that we get 50 applications, most of which are very weak. But I think I could support in general some rubric being put into place that included that. If you want a motion, I could probably synthesize that into something a little simpler, but I think Mr. Braden and some of the other folks want to talk.
In light of your comments, Kim, there is a provision in the new language for a sunset, correct?
There is, but this is the language that was originally intended for the comp plan, and then just for ease for the council's review, since the council has seen it before, it was included as an example with this agenda item, but the suggestion would be to put it into an ordinance for LDC form, and then we would put an appropriate sunset provision for the ordinance. So, for example, if you wanted it to sunset in 12 months, we would just have a section that would automatically sunset the ordinance.
Okay, thank you very much. Up is Mr. Marlar. Okay. Mr. Braden, I apologize.
All right, thank you, Mayor. That was my concern when I was going over all of it. You know, I'm more the KISS kind of guy. Keep it simple, stupid. And it just looks like if the right attorney got a hold of this, he could shoot it full of holes because there's just so much of it. And that's just my personal opinion. It was just black and white and not so much. I mean, this reminds me of our tree ordinance. It was just too much of it.
Oh, don't say that.
Don't say that. It was just too much of it. If it was just black and white, plain and simple, so if 10 people would look at this, they'd all come to the same conclusion and not just, but anyhow, that's, I'd like to see if we couldn't shorten it up quite a bit. And that's my thoughts. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Braden. Mr. Marlar.
Thank you, Mayor. My comment's very simple. We had a sort of a cascade effect that started with the economy and then the oil spill, and I think since we tabled the previous item, that this is the right way to go. We need to come up with something that helps those people that, we didn't bring on the natural disaster and we didn't bring on the other things that happened. So I think we need to have something in effect that would help these citizens and landowners. I do not want to go into the Burt Harris Acts, to be totally honest with you, so I would support what we're trying to do.
Thank you, Mr. Marlar. I'm not too sure if this would help them because the burden of proof is put on them. Correct, Kim? But at least would give us the latitude and the guidance to put together a rubrics or a matrix of how we evaluate whether a property even qualifies to be vested or not. Next up will be Mr. Destin.
Thank you, Mayor. I was just going to make a motion. I was going to move that the council direct Mr. Burns and Ms. Kopp to work together to develop us a rubric, probably based off of Ms. Kopp's previous rubric and suggestion of a grandfathering clause that includes a sunset provision, and to bring that back to council.
We have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
We have a second. Any further discussion?
One question for
Mr. Morgan?
Ms. Kopp. So when I initially spoke to you about the grandfathering language, one of the concerns I had was annexation agreement that we entered into. And they are entitled to certain vested rights, in which case if we revert back to the old comp plan and they submit for the rights which the council voted on to give them when they were annexed, they'll be able to sue the city and be able to build it with a sunset provision. If the people that we entered an annexation agreement into an annexation agreement with, if it sunsets and they're not ready to build, doesn't it render the effectiveness of the grandfathering clause for that annexation property useless?
Well, arguably, the response is that they have a year. They don't have to build it within that year. They can request a vesting determination. So it would depend how ultimately, what changes are made to this. As it's currently written, it's a 5-year default. So they'd have 5 years. But that can be changed. That's one of the details of this particular language tonight. Jeff may change it. We can bring you back a different time frame. It also provides that the default is 5 years, but council can give them an alternate amount of time. So if you felt a particular project should be vested for 10 years or 3 years, and there was reasoning, you could do that.
Thank you very much. Seeing no further discussion, we have a motion, we have a second, and let's go ahead and decide. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much.
I'd like to thank council very much for that policy decision. That's going to be very helpful for staff. Going forward to the next item, sir, we have the proposed resolution in support for a voter referendum of the half-cent sales tax for Okaloosa County. We've heard from Mr. John Hofstad, the county administrator, and Mr. Graham Fountain, County Commissioner. Thank you. And also Commissioner Kelly Wines, thank you so much for being here tonight and addressing council. At this point, if there's any questions regarding the resolution, I will be happy to entertain those at this time.
Thank you, ma'am.
Mr. Mayor.
That's what I'll entertain a motion for this resolution.
I got my name in, unless Ms. Overdeer's first. Okay. I move to approve resolution number 18-18 and authorize the mayor to sign the proposed resolution and direct the city clerk to forward resolution 18-18 to the Okaloosa County League of Cities and the Okaloosa County Board of County Commissioners.
I'll second that.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Dixon, and we have 2 seconds.
And Mayor, real quick, do you mean the substituted one that I sent out today, or the one included in the package?
1818, whatever that is.
They're both numbered the same.
All right, 1818, I'll accept yours.
Excuse me, Mayor?
Yes, ma'am.
If you're open for discussion, I believe the Captain Charlie Nix of the Okaloosa County Sheriff's Office would like to comment, sir.
No problem, because I'm going to comment too. So we have a motion, we have a second. We'll start our discussion. First up will be Mr. Overdeer.
No, I was just going to make the resolution.
All right, Mr. Morgan.
Do we want to let Mr. Nix speak first? Please do.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. I want you to know that the sheriff strongly supports this referendum on the 5% sales tax, or half cent. Sorry. Sorry about that. Yeah, it did. It sounded good. The infrastructure, it would definitely help us with our infrastructure, and he feels that strongly would help with public safety. We have a heroin epidemic right now. We have overcrowding in our jails. We have a training center that badly needs to be updated. We have a medical examiner's office that is absolutely terrible that needs to be replaced. These are just examples. We are probably, if not the leader in boating accidents in the state of Florida, we're pretty close. Anything to do with the water. So I'm here to tell you that he is a strong supporter of it, and we hope that we can get your support behind it, because it would definitely help your law enforcement and your first responders for sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Captain. One of the things that the commissioners didn't share is I think out of this proposed tax that Destin itself is supposed to get $999,000 annually, basically $1 million to be spent on things that Destin needs. This is money over a 10-year period we could use for undergrounding, electricity on Highway 98, stormwater runoff issues, some of the things outside of Commons Drive that actually are used in Destin. So I just want to remind us, too, that we're not taking a vote to impose a 0.5% sales tax. All we're doing is supporting the county's initiative, because this is going to the voters of the county and to the voters of the city of Destin. They'll be the ones that finally decide whether this sales tax is approved or disapproved. I just wanted to put my 5 cents worth in. Mr. Morgan.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate the county commissioners coming tonight, and Mr. Hofstad. My concerns are one, we're asking for support of a $200 million tax over 10 years without seeing how that money is going to be spent via line items. I'm not comfortable doing that. I know we could spend $1 million annually in the city of Destin well. I know we have capital projects that need that money. I want to support this tax. I know the sheriff's office can desperately use it. But I would like to see how much of that money is going to the sheriff's office before we ask the voters to support a $200 million tax increase over 10 years. The city of Destin contributes. In 2017, we contributed between 32 and 33% of all property taxes. And we're going to get 5.23% of the sales tax back. Now, granted, a lot of that's going to be used for what's good for the counties, good for the city. For example, money spent with the Sheriff's Department will absolutely be wonderful for the city of Destin. And I appreciate the chamber meeting with the county commission on a few projects in unincorporated Okaloosa County. Commons Drive desperately needs the improvements. But still, Destin is going to be paying an outsized portion of this tax relative to other municipalities with what we received back, because state statute has it to where it's distributed not from the point of collection, which if that were the case, Destin's going to be collecting, I don't know the exact numbers. Does anyone from the county know the exact numbers of how much is collected on the Destin Peninsula? Well, when you consider we collect 66% of the TDC taxes and 32 to 33% of the property taxes, I think Destin will certainly contribute an outsized portion of the sales tax. And, I don't think that we're getting, enough of the sales tax back. I can guarantee you the city of Destin's collecting more in sales tax than most other cities in the county, maybe Crestview. They're significantly larger than us. So without seeing, I would like to see a dollar amount of the projects that the county has told the chamber that they were going to support. And the goodwill between the city and the county goes both ways. I was happy to see the BP money spent for the Crestview project. I would be happy for I really do want to support the sales tax, but I just feel like we need to see numbers on how exactly this money is going to be spent, because a very large portion of this money is going to be generated in the city of Destin. And we're not going to see a lot of that money that's generated here. A lot of that money is going to go back to the county commission. So with that said, until I see better numbers, I'm not going to reject this, but I would like to table it until I could see a more refined numbers and how this money is going to be spent. And like I said, I really do want to support this, and I want to build a better relationship with the county, and I think the Triumph funding and this would be a good start, but I just think it's irresponsible for the city of Destin to support a tax of $200 million without seeing exactly how it's going to be spent first.
So are you making a motion to table it?
I'd make a secondary motion to table this until...
Okay, we have a motion to table it. Does anyone want to second that motion?
I'll second it for discussion, sure.
No, can't discuss. Table it, it's table it. There'll be no more discussion.
I'll make a motion to continue.
So you're just, you're withdrawing your motion to table, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and you making a motion to continue?
Continue to time not yet certain, based on when we receive better information.
Set the next meeting, and that way you can discuss it, as opposed to, if you do it the other way, it's an indefinite, basically tabling it indefinitely, if you continue it indefinitely. So.
Sure, absolutely.
So we have a motion to continue it at a later date, time certain.
Yes.
Do I have a second to continue it at a later date?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. And we'll wipe everybody off here. And let's go ahead and vote on this substitute motion.
I want to hear discussion with the council and see what...
I apologize. I didn't know if anybody wanted to discuss the second motion or not.
Mayor? Mayor? May I have permission to ask a question of Mr. John Hofstad?
Absolutely.
Mr. Hofstad, would you please come to the podium, sir? Understanding that you may not have this information with you at your fingertips, sir, do you have a general estimated amount of the projects that I know that you had presented to the Chamber of Commerce as projects that the county would be doing in the Destin area? Do you have an idea of how much that might be spent?
I can tell you, Mayor and council members, that the order of magnitude need exceeds the level of revenue that's coming in. We have worked, probably the last year in developing a list of needs. We have in this county a pressing need in excess of $60 million just for stormwater improvement. But we have identified a number of projects in this county. One of the projects in particular this council took action on, I believe at your last meeting, which was in support of a resolution for the P.J. Adams Antioch corridor, what we refer to as the Southwest Bypass. That project in itself is going to require a commitment from the county of about $25 million. I can tell you we do not have $25 million in gas tax money. The plan was to leverage local option sales tax dollars against potentially $65 million in Triumph funding and against $100 million in federal highway funding and state funding to complete that project. So this is yet one source to commit to a major transportation need. We've identified a number of projects, off-system projects, not necessarily DOT projects, but projects in partnership with DOT, Commons Drive, and some of the improvements and intersections through Destin that we felt confident that we could contribute dollars to accelerate those projects. Now, projects inside of jurisdictional Destin, certainly the dollars are available for you to use as you see fit, up to $1 million a year, $10 million over the life of the tax, that sunset period. So if you have needs inside the city, obviously you're closer to it than we are. Those would be dollars available for your use. Public safety, in particular, the sheriff's office. The sheriff has provided us an exhaustive list of needs that he has, facility needs, equipment needs. The sheriff is set to get roughly a third of this revenue that's coming into the county. As you know, the Board of County Commissioners fully funds the sheriff's office. And that is fully funded through property taxes. The sheriff has a growing list of capital needs. His facility, his headquarters facility alone, he's looking at some improvements with that facility. He has a Bracken Street facility in Crestview that's aging. We have needs to expand the jail. We need to make use of that facility, so we're going to have to stand up a facility for the sheriff in the Crestview area. So there are, to answer your question, yes, we have a list, and that list exceeds the available revenue coming in. I think what's key to all this is not just staff and the Board of County Commissioners making decisions on the expenditure of these dollars. This is structured in such a way that we have a Citizens Oversight Committee built into this. That 5-person committee, elected by the board, district-wide, will weigh in on all these project submittals. So staff can provide project lists all day long. But we want to give a Citizens Oversight Committee a chance to weigh in on all those competing needs, bring back in front of the Board of County Commissioners what the prioritization is of those particular needs. So I know that was a long explanation, but to answer your question, yes.
Yes, sir. Is there a person from Destin on that oversight committee?
That oversight committee has not been impaneled yet. That is coming up. We have an item on our agenda tomorrow morning is a redraft of the referendum language that will go in front of the Board of County Commissioners. Once the board has approved that, the marketing for this effort starts. And we also have some oversight that has been required by the state of Florida, the OPAGA office, and please don't ask me to tell you what that acronym stands for, but it's a program office in the state of Florida that has been tasked with the responsibility for every jurisdiction in the state that is considering a local option surtax. It has to be evaluated through this state office and deemed to be a defined need in that particular jurisdiction. So with the action that our board will take in the morning, that language will go to OPAGA. OPAGA will weigh in. We have had conversations with them over the last few weeks. Certainly my view at this point is they're supportive of what we're trying to do here in Okaloosa County. But that'll be determined tomorrow. Once that's determined, then we will appeal to the board to nominate members. But I would suspect you have a commissioner that serves your district that more than likely, yes, you're probably going to have somebody from Destin that participates in that.
Okay, and the reason I'm asking this question is because it sounds like you have a lot of projects that qualify, but you do not have that definitive list yet, and that this citizen body is going to help to create that definitive list. Is that what I understand?
Yes, ma'am. To answer your question, we have a list that far exceeds what the revenue source is. The plan is to bring that to this Citizens Oversight Committee, work with them to define what is the prioritization of need, and then that will be brought back in front of the board. But I can tell you, our projects are a mix of transportation projects, stormwater projects, support for public safety. We have a failed 911 communication system in this county. We are working with the sheriff's office to possibly consolidate that effort, but you're talking just that communication system alone is probably several $1 million.
And so my last question, sir, thank you so much for taking the time. The resolution that I've brought forward to council tonight in consideration is not to support a half-penny sales tax, but simply to support it being put on a referendum so that the voters can decide whether they want a half-penny sales tax.
Absolutely. I think that's the beauty in this type of revenue source is we can sit here all day long and say we have defined need for infrastructure, but ultimately you have to put that in front of the voters, and the voters of this county are going to decide whether there's a need for that. Yes, ma'am.
I hit the wrong button, so would anyone like, I'm just going to have to recognize you visually. Mr. Dixon.
Can you talk to us just a little bit, Mr. Hofstad, about the military and the fact that you know, I do know that one of the things that worried me to death was hearing a BRAC commission was going to start looking and worrying about the traffic that we have up in the Crestview area and knowing full well that they're going to want that remedied some way. Could you talk just a little bit about that?
Absolutely, and thank you for the reminder, Councilman Dixon. I have personally met with a 96 Test Wing commander on a number of occasions. Just about 6 weeks ago, we hosted the Secretary of the Department of Transportation, Mike Dew, from the state of Florida, hosted him at Eglin. I will tell you that the base commander views this as his #1 mission impact for the Eglin Range and the Eglin Test Mission. His comment to me is, if I have to have airmen, resources, and fuel stacked up on 85, and that prevents me from getting those needed resources to the 7th Group or Duke Field, that's a mission impact. And we have a letter from General Durteen, the 96th Test Wing Commander, in support of that very issue and in support of accelerating these projects.
Okay, and if anybody doesn't realize what that would do to us, I'm sorry, I don't know. But another thing, hurricane evacuation. And we live in a very hurricane-prone area. Has there been any studies to determine what you're doing there will help us with evacuation?
That was the other concern expressed to DOT in the meeting we had with DOT. For those of you that have been in this county long enough, I can recall back in my earlier days in public service in the mid-90s in Hurricane Opal, and you had gridlock on 85. You actually had cars pulled over on the side of the road on 85 that had ran out of fuel. 123 at the time was a 2-lane road. We have one north-south corridor through this county, and that is Highway 85 until you get to Crestview. You get to Crestview, you've got 85, and you've got Highway 4 and 189, but we have a major bottleneck evacuating the most populous part of this county, which is the south end of this county, south of the reservation through one north-south corridor. You've got to go north to get to the interstate. And so that is the other critical concern with this particular project in general.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to recognize Commissioner Kelly Wines, Captain Kelly Wines.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members. This Citizens Committee is going to be comprised of 5 members. Each commissioner will appoint one. If it gives you any satisfaction, I can give you my assurance that one of them will come from District 5, and he'll come from the city limits of Destin. There is some merit to the amount of participation that Destin has in all these tax increments, in the TDC and the grand scheme of things, in the road tax and the ad valorem. It all weighs in there. I fully intend to appoint somebody and give you my obligation to appoint somebody from Destin. In fact, to take any suggestions from any of you at any time, I'm a good listener. So there you have it. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Commissioner Wines. I just want to, I'll say my say, and then if anyone else would like to make another comment before we take this to a vote, I recommend that this motion fails, and that we make a motion to support the resolution. And the reason for that, even though I don't get to vote, is the sales tax is decided by the voters, not us or the Okaloosa County Commissioners. They'll take this resolution, the commissioners will, like they got resolutions from every other city in this county, and put together a campaign to sell this to the voters of Okaloosa County, including Destin voters. So in the end, the voters will decide. This council will not be responsible for this sales tax if it's voted into place. The citizens of Okaloosa County will be. Not only that, but this tax will serve us directly with $1 million a year for 10 years that this council will decide how it gets spent. And as we've heard, it will also affect us indirectly through improvements in the sheriff's capability to serve Okaloosa County and the city of Destin, provide serious transportation access. You know, they talk about it, the gridlock and stuff when it comes to the military, but that's the same road that our visitors use to come and stay in Destin. And so it's going to benefit us. Any infrastructure, especially transportation improvements that this does, will indirectly affect our things. So my recommendation is that when we finish our discussion and we come to vote, that this motion to continue fails, and that I'll I'll ask for a motion that we support this resolution. First up will be Mr. Destin.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, sitting on the TDC, which is a subdivision of the county, it's become apparently clear that the city of Destin needs to mend its fences with the county. We need to work together. There is no doubt that there is tremendous need within the city of Destin and in the county as a whole. There's so much need. There really, really is. There's no doubt about that. But we need to start working together to come to these solutions on how we're going to fund these things. So generally, you're going to have my support, but I do know that we need to develop a list if we're ever going to be able to successfully sell it to the public. And within the city of Destin, I got to tell you guys, we got to get working together on fixing some of Destin's issues, because we're about to try to start underground in this city, and it's going to cost a lot of money. And the reason that we need to underground is that if the golden goose that benefits all of Okaloosa County, which is the city of Destin, if it's going to have a chance in the next 10 to 20 years to compete with the likes of South Walton and all of these other world-class destinations, we got to get a facelift, because the demographics are not going in the right direction. And one of those ways that we're going to do that is to be able to underground, so don't forget about us.
Thank you, Mr. Destin. Ms. Ramswell.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, I took a look at the numbers for 2017 and the estimated distribution of the collected tax, and 19 million was collected, with the county receiving 12.6 million, which was 66%. And then next was Crestview, who got 1.8 million, which was 9%. Then Fort Walton Beach with 1.6 million, 8.4%. Niceville was next with $1 million at 5.73%. And then Destin came in with about 998,000 at 5.2%. And, you know, the county doesn't need our support to put this on the ballot, but, you know, my initial gut reaction was Destin the cash cow. But I had to step back and, just like with anything else, take a broader look and consider the bigger picture. And with that being said, it's not the county's fault that the distribution is the way it is. That's Florida statute. So as much as the numbers seem inequitable, perhaps, because of what we all know that the city of Destin actually contributes, it's not the county's fault. It's just a matter of how the state designated these funds to be distributed. And, you know, we need 30,000 a year, we need 500,000, we darn sure need $1 million, and we need more than that. Just like the county was saying, they sure need more than what they're pulling in right now as well. We all have major, major needs. But, you know, we've got to get to the point of, and this is to use a cliche, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours, we're in this together, to add in another cliche. But really, I agree with Parker in that we've got to work together, and we've got to ensure that by doing so, we're also looking out for Destin. And so I will support this, because I believe that by supporting this, I am giving Destin about $1 million a year. I am helping others in the county, and I don't want to penalize the county for something that's not their fault, so to speak. So that's my perspective.
Thank you, Ms. Ramswell. Next will be Mr. Overdeer.
Okay, so here's my take on this. And we've been listening to a lot of this, and I totally support Chatham and what he's saying. We need to know the numbers. We've got to see, the voters aren't going to vote for this unless they see where the money's going to be spent. So that's going to be forthcoming, and I'm sure that it's the county's responsibility to get that out to the citizens, and that's the only way they're going to sell it. So that's going to happen. So what we're doing tonight is we're not voting on this tax increase. We're voting on supporting the county, and I think it's important for us to show our support for the county. The county has supported us in just an awful lot of ways. In just the last few weeks, they gave us almost $8 million. I mean, they gave us $3 million for beach restoration. We needed $2 million, and then through no fault of the counties, the Corps of Engineers pulled the barge, and we needed another $1 million from them so we'd get our own barge back in September, and they gave it to us. They gave us $4.8 million so we can finish our crosstown connector. This is all money that in the future, we're going to be going to the county and asking them for money like this again. And this is not going to come out of this half-cent sales tax. This is going to come out of the money that the county's going to have. So we're going to need to be online with them. And I've continued to say cooperate and graduate. We need to be in cooperation with them, just like they're going to cooperate with us. And so I'm going to support the motion, the original motion, just like we motioned. And I agree with, like I said, I agree with Chatham. The numbers are going to come. The county's going to be responsible for doing that, so the citizens can vote on it. Otherwise, they won't vote on it. So that's all I got.
Thank you, Skip. So the motion was to do a continuance, and we had a second. So let's vote on that, and then
Gary, I'll make one thing. I will withdraw my motion, and that's the peril of speaking first. And they've all been very convincing, and I appreciate Mr. Hofstad coming up here and clarifying some misconceptions. But I would like to point out one thing. Skip, that money wasn't given to us. We pay into that system. And I hate to use the word entitled, but the city of Destin isn't entitled to a portion of that TD semi. So, but I will withdraw my motion.
Okay. The maker of the motion wants to withdraw it. The person who seconded it, do you approve that?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so motion withdrawn. I will entertain a motion. Okay, so we have the original motion. Is there any further discussion on the original motion to approve?
Mayor, real quick, Tuffy, your motion was as to the version I sent over today, right?
Yes, the version that you sent today.
What is the difference between the two?
The other version has a lot of what we'll call surplusage and legalese, that there's just stuff in there that kind of doesn't need to be in a resolution like that. The resolution that I sent forward is bare bones. It just says you're going to support the county's efforts to put it on the ballot in November and for a 10-year term. There's some language in there that would potentially arguably obligate the city of Destin at a later point in time to how they would want to allocate the sales tax and the property taxes. I cut stuff like that out.
My understanding was that each city has changed it a little bit.
Yeah, for the most part.
I think the original resolution, before Jeff made some changes, was pretty much Fort Walton Beach's resolution verbatim, and Jeff just didn't want to be a copycat, I guess.
Just fine.
So we have a motion, we have a second, we've had plenty of discussion. Seeing no further, you want to go, Rodney?
He was trying to say yes.
Well, I did not overlook you on purpose, sir. Go ahead.
Thank you. I just want to clarify why I have so much heartburn with this and why it aggravates me so much. I hate beating this dead horse, and I hope it's the last time I have to. But it's pretty ironic that not long ago there was $112,000 spent to get me out of this seat, and all they based it on was I raised taxes $400,000. That was it. That's all they could come up with. And that was unanimous from this whole council, not just me. And now some of these same people that were spreading all this negativity about myself, hurting me, hurting my family, now they're coming and asking me to help them raise taxes, not just thousands of dollars, but hundreds of millions of dollars. It's, man, I've beat myself up, and I've lost a lot of sleep over it, because it's real hard not to take that personal, real hard. You know, like it's been said before, the city and the county has a lot of fences to bend. I appreciate all the county commissioners coming tonight. But we've got a lot of work to do, and it's not just the work we've done in the last couple of weeks with the crosstown connector and the dredging projects. We need to keep this moving forward. I know it's not the county's fault of where these funds are spent, but it just seems like if Destin, if a lot of the money comes out of Destin that's being spread through the county, it seems like the county and Crestview and everybody else would want to try to help Destin, you know, succeed, because the more we succeed, the more the whole county succeeds. It's like 43 to 47% of this tax is coming out of Destin. And if this is not based off, what I've been told, it's not based off population. So why isn't Destin getting a little bit more? But anyhow, like the mayor said, this is not, Destin is not raising taxes. We're going to let the voters decide that. If they want it, great. If they don't, that's great too. But I'm going to support this. And I'm not going to take it personal. I should. But during the election, I took the high road, and I'm going to continue to take it, just to prove that I am the better man.
Thank you, Rodney. I'm sorry.
I will support this, Mayor, and thank you for giving me the chance.
Thank you, Rodney, very much. Okay, I'm going to go ahead without any further discussion. Let's go ahead and cast our votes. The vote is unanimous. So moved. I want to thank everyone for weighing in on this, on the discussion. Thank you, commissioners, all of you, for making your comments and help clarify the situation for us. Let's see. How you doing, Tuffy? You need a break? All right. Tuffy has dictated that this meeting is temporarily suspended for 5 minutes. Everybody take a seat, please, and we'll go ahead and finish this meeting. We're now on item 4D, which is still part of the city manager's report, and this is the announcements. City manager?
Yes, sir. I just want to announce our upcoming workshops next week, Monday, June 11th at 5:30 p.m. here in the City Hall Annex. We will have the short-term rental workshop, and then the next Wednesday on June 13th from 5:30 to 6:30 p.m. here in the Annex. We're going to have a joint special meeting of the CRA Board and the Harbor CRA Advisory Board. And then immediately following at 6:30 p.m., again here in the City Hall Annex, it will be a special City Council meeting, and this is a discussion regarding the Royal Melvin Heritage Park on the harbor. And then that Friday, June 15th, will be in City Hall proper in the in the boardroom, and we will have a all-day City Council visioning session from 9 to 5, but we will have breakfast for council at 8.
Thank you so much. Sounds like a busy week. I'm sure we'll have some attrition there because that's an awful big demand on the council people, especially if you're trying to work for a living. I will be at all those now that somebody else is driving my boat. We will move on to item number 5, which is the public hearing process. Mr. Burns.
Ordinance number 18-10-CC, an ordinance of the City of Destin, Florida relating to short-term rental registrations, providing for authority, providing for findings of fact, providing for the amendment of the Code of Ordinances, Article 6, registration of short-term rentals, amending sections 13-105 through 13-110, providing for incorporation into the Code of Ordinances, providing for conflicting provisions, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date. And we're here on first reading, and this is a public hearing.
Thank you, Ms. Burns. So we're at the public hearing portion of this meeting. So this is time for anyone in the audience that would like to approach the podium and make comments on this proposed ordinance. Raise your hand. Come on up. Anyone? Don't be first. Don't be last. That surprises me. So, seeing how there's no public comment, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll do that.
Would you please start?
I would do that. Okay, so I move that the City Council approve proposed ordinance 18-10-CC on first reading and direct staff to schedule a second reading for final adoption.
We have a motion.
Second.
And we have a second. Discussion. Ms. Ramswell.
Thank you, Mayor. I do have one question. I was reviewing the documents for tonight and then going back through some of the minutes from the Short-Term Rental Committee meeting minutes, and I noticed that staff has recommended a change that varies from what the committee had actually recommended, and that's the penalty phase. According to the minutes from the short-term rental minutes, there was actually, it looks like 1, 2, 3 steps in the penalty phase, and if I'm reading what was given to us tonight as a recommendation from staff, then it looks like it's just one, like a flat $200 fine. Can you explain that?
Carice?
Yes, ma'am. So, right. It directed to me, and then I can direct it to staff. So, yes, we did change that one area of the penalty phase, except not quite the way that you explained it. I will let Ms. Jenny Breiler go into detail, but I can tell you that This was discussed thoroughly between myself and Ms. Kopp and Ms. Breiler to get the maximum punitive action for violators. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Ms. Breiler so she can explain exactly the change that was made.
Good evening, Mayor and Councilman. Jennifer Breiler with the Community Development Department. The manager is absolutely correct, and in sitting down and taking the recommendations from the task force and working with an internal work team, we worked through all of their recommendations as is directed by City Council, and we got to that one, and we will impose a fine if they register late. However, one of the recommendations from the task force was to limit their ability to rent their property. And in my experience with short-term rental, that isn't an effective way to regulate that behavior. And so I wrote in there that they would go to the special magistrate, because it's been my experience that if you don't require them to register and you say that they can't do it, they'll do it anyway. Meaning the property owners will rent their property regardless of what the city says, and then that puts the onus back on code enforcement to try and find and catch them renting their property, because they'll either say it was my neighbor, it's people vacate, friends of mine from Colorado. There's a lot of excuses that people offer. And this way, when they come to the special magistrate, then it's a very strong process that they go through, and then they're required to pay a $250 a day fine for not meeting the criteria of our code. And so I felt that in cooperation with the work team, that was a more impactful punishment for the short-term rental. And looking at our data, we have been very successful in getting people to register their short-term rental property. And so we have a database that every year we look at to make sure that not only are we going after ones that haven't registered, but anything in the city's jurisdiction, we will make sure if you were a short-term rental last year, you better be sure you've registered again this year. And if you haven't, then you have to provide documentation of your homestead. So,
right, so the punitive action can actually escalate. So $250 a day fine is something that we can impose on a first offense. The state allows us to impose up to $500 a day. So if you do the math on how much an average short-term rental brings in on a 7-day rental, and then you calculate $500 a day, that's going to severely cut into their profit margin. That will get their attention. And by imposing those heavy fines, we could actually then eventually put a lien against the property if necessary. So, we felt as staff that it was more punitive to go the route of the fines rather than say you can't register, knowing that they're going to rent their property anyway, and it becomes more difficult for us to catch them renting. Did that explain your
It did explain. Can you show me where in this ordinance that is spelled out?
yes, ma'am, in 13-1110, we talk about if a property owner fails to register their short-term rental in a timely manner, fines will be imposed consistent with the schedule of fees. And so in our next reading on this, we'll have that amended fee schedule, because that's done by resolution. It's not an ordinance. It wouldn't be in this document anyway. And then we say fails to register their short-term rental unit within 90 days of receipt of the notice to register, the property owner is subject to the code enforcement proceedings. And that's where the code enforcement, so we would do a notice of violation, they would go to special magistrate if they didn't come into compliance then, and we would recommend a $250 a day fine until they did come into compliance.
Okay, so a couple comments, but first, subject to code enforcement proceedings, does that need to be better specified which proceedings and what violations? Because it's vague, and I don't know if it's purposely vague or if there's only one potential code enforcement
I think rather than being vague, it was intended to be broad, so that they could be subject to all code enforcement proceedings rather than limiting it to a certain one.
But that would leave the punitive assessment up to code enforcement, correct?
No.
Or the magistrate?
Well, it does leave it up to the magistrate, yes, but but staff usually asks for the maximum daily fine. In fact, I don't think I know of a case offhand where we didn't ask for at least $250 a day on a first violation, and then for a repeat violation, it would be $500 a day. And with all that being said, short-term rentals also are not homestead properties, so after 3 months, the city could, if the city imposes a lien, the city could then foreclose a lien after 3 months.
Okay, so I guess back to one of my original concerns was, I see several members of the committee here, and I know they worked exceptionally hard to come up with the pieces that they did and this step plan that they had. I know you said in your experience that you didn't think that the loss of the ability to register was effective, but no offense, but you're one voice, and this was a committee of, 7, 8? And this was a unanimous decision on their part. And so that's why I wanted to hear what y'all had to say and see if it was a matter of something, a legal issue or something, because I know that they put so much thought into what they brought forward. I'd hate to just say, okay, thanks, but we're going to go. So can you, why would you think that your solution is the better one than what they came up with?
When the short-term rental committee, of which I sat as facilitator, so I know how hard they worked, when they made their recommendations and brought it to council, and council asked staff to go ahead and bring it back in the form of the ordinance, part of what we do is analyze the recommendation so that it can fit into the ordinance. My understanding was that we were trying to find the maximum punitive action that would force people to register their short-term rentals. So just telling them that you can't register is not that punitive because they're going to rent anyway, and then it becomes a different process of trying to catch them in the act. Whereas if they're not registered and we start imposing fines on them, it starts to hurt because we're cutting into their profit margin. Now, if this council decides that we want to go back and have it the way they originally did, which is just not allow them to register as a short-term rental, we absolutely will, bow to the will of the council. But part of what we do is analyze the recommendations and put them into the code of ordinances the way they make sense, and again, looking for maximum punitive action. That's why the three of us had felt it was more efficient to put hefty fines, possible liens, and foreclosures, rather than just tell them they can't register.
Okay, thank you for explaining that. And with that said, again, no offense at all, but I'd like to stick with what the unanimous decision was of this committee and what they brought forward. They felt like, as representatives of the different populations that were affected by all this, that this was something that would hurt. And so that would be my thought, is to stick with their original recommendations. And I know you mentioned at some point the effort it would take to actually go through and implement this, but we're already going through with quite a significant amount of effort trying to register them and keep track of them, and I don't see why that would be any more difficult than recognizing someone didn't register. Okay, you can't rent anymore. If they're registering, great, now you get to go see the magistrate or whoever.
We have to prove that they're actually renting, so it's almost like trying to prove that they're having commercial weddings. So it's documentation, frequency, density, intensity. So either way, we just thought it was more efficient and more punitive to levy the fines, but if this council decides that they want to just withhold registration from the short-term rentals, then we'll change the language. Do you have anything you want to add, Ms. Kopp?
There were some legal concerns with the language as well because of the statute that says we can't prohibit the short-term rentals. I don't want it to be interpreted as us prohibiting a short-term rental, thereby giving them a lawsuit against the city.
But it's only prohibiting them as a punitive device because they lost the privilege.
But that would certainly be our defense, I agree.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ramswell. Next, Mr. Braden.
Thank you, Mayor. I really don't want to get in the habit, and it seems like we may have been getting in it in the past, of the council approving something, sending it to staff to bring back, to vote on, and then staff changing it or adding to it, and then we finding it, and then we have all these questions. To me, it looks like, we're trying to hide stuff or add stuff in it or whatever, and I don't want the public thinking that at all. And when I was reading it, I thought the same thing, that, with this, I thought we just sent it back, we approved, everything was unanimous, and now staff has changed things on it and bringing it back, and I wish we were told that in advance, so we knew it was going on, not the night of the meeting. But I do agree that, I want to be able to penalize somebody, however we can do it. I don't want to get in this big lawsuit, because we're keeping them from a short-term rental. And if that's staff recommendation from, the attorney, that's something that we can enforce, and it's going to get in their pocket, and we can do that from word go, then that's the direction we need to go in. Not to say you can't do something, because we all know they're going to do it anyway, and then we got to catch them doing it. So that's all I've got, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Braden. Mr. Marler.
Thank you. First, in defense of staff, that's their job, to make sure it's legal and right. I mean, we can sit legislative stuff here, but what we say up here sometimes isn't the way the law is going to read. And as Ms. Lejeune has stated, we have to have documented proof. We have to have the right kind of stuff to prove something before we can do it. What we say up here might conflict with the laws, and we don't want any more lawsuits. But anyway, my actual questions, Mr. Burns, is this a opportunity, the question I asked you earlier between meetings about the inspections and stuff, would this be a proper place, or do I need to come back after we do something?
On this? Is it next?
It's Monday.
I think the workshop would be the best time for that one. That's a different enough issue from this ordinance here that if they voted to add that in, that would kick it back to the LPA for a couple months. So
Okay, that's fine, thanks. That's all I have.
I'd like to make a comment. In light of Ms. Ramswell's comments and the city manager's, the panel worked really, really hard, but the panel would consist of citizens who are living the issue, and so they came in there with good intentions to try to come up with solutions to fix a problem. And there were people on both sides of that issue representing the renters and the full-time residents, and they did the very best they could. In this particular thing, they did come up with a unanimous decision, but I think with the language that the staff has provided us, the change not only lives up to the intent of that unanimous decision, but actually made it better by putting more teeth in it. And so the language that their recommendation said, I don't think is any way diminished by the language that the staff has made this change that we saw for the first time Friday. I think it actually lives up to the intent. I guess we can maybe get some thoughts on that discussion by the panel members, but I think they took the intent and stayed true to it by actually making it a much tougher regulation. So that's just my thought on that.
Ms. Kopp, if they've made the change or voted to add that back in, would that kick it back to the LPA again? So would it go back through the whole process again? Would that be a significant enough change, or could it come back for first reading?
I think it would go back to the LPA again.
All right. Any further discussion?
Would it be proper to ask one of the members of the committee to speak? I mean, I know we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 at least here. Would one of y'all, Ms. Brown or Mr. Shelton, I see raising their hands? I just want to make sure we stay true to their goals.
Patty Brown, 86 Shire, Destin, Florida. I know I sent you guys all an email today and asked you to not vote for this, to send it back to staff, but I found out a little bit more when I talked to Jennifer tonight, and I also did some research this afternoon. Flagler County tried to do that, where they prohibited people from renting their houses, and it failed because it's against Florida statute. So that was our intent, but when I did more research today, I found that that was actually a problem. But the one thing I do fully believe in is escalating the fines, and if we can do it that way, because what hurts people the most is their pocketbook. So, and I know myself, on my street, I made sure everybody was registered, and then when we were in the meetings, and the TDC sent us a list of all the people, half of my houses were no longer even registered. So this is money that the city is losing that we need for code enforcement. But we need to stay on the right side of the law, because if we don't, you know they're going to make sure that we're held accountable. So what Jennifer told me, I actually think is a really good thing. If we can, if they're a repeat person and we send them to the magistrate and we have these stiff fines, they're not going to do it again. And that's really our whole thing, is holding people accountable for their actions. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Quick, Mayor, strategically speaking, there's a workshop on this next Monday, and I'm sure there's going to be more suggested changes at that time. If there's a lot of passion to add that back in, I would just personally recommend that y'all pass the current version as it is, and then come back, and when it gets amended again, you could add that back in. That way, there's something in place this summer, because you could be looking at, losing a couple months.
Well, yeah, and we do have 9 other items that have to be addressed, so we're going to be making some adjustments as we go.
Well, Mayor, our suggestion, staff, is go ahead and approve these on first and second reading, and then whatever comes out of the workshop, we can bring back as an additional ordinance, but to delay putting in ordinance what we already know we can do, I think is a disservice to the neighborhoods. I think we can pass these in first and second reading, and then whatever comes out of the workshop, then we'll bring back another set of ordinance.
That sounds good, and it seems like the committee may be in favor of that as well. Mr. Shelton?
Yeah, Darrell Shelton, 18 Noriega Road. I served on the committee, and I'm being the messenger tonight. Mr. Scally over there, he owns a big property management company. Mr. Tadlock and myself agree with Ms. Brown. We don't have a problem with the staff's recommendation. So we did work pretty hard on it, and they explained it a lot better than what we understood it. So we're good to go.
Thank you, Darrell.
Thank you.
So, seeing no further discussion,
I'll make the motion.
can we make a motion? Go ahead, Ms. Ramswell.
Oh, did we make it?
Hey, did we make a motion? Yes. Skip made the motion. A senior moment on my part. I've struggled all night, folks. I apologize. So we have a motion, we have a second, no further discussion. Let's take it to a vote. Unanimous, so moved. No items on the consent agenda? Nope. So, we are final to our last portion, and we'll start at the end.
I'm good, Mayor, thank you.
First but not last, Mr. Braden.
Good tonight, Mayor, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Braden. Ms. Ramswell.
Thank you, Mayor. I actually was appointed by the Senate President in 2014 to sit on Veterans Florida, which looks to give opportunities and help making the transition from military to veteran status easier, and also look to keep veterans in Florida. And we actually had a meeting this week in which we gave out our first annual Veterapreneur of the Year award. And it was so great to see these folks that have come up with ideas, they've done the training, they've gone through these different programs that we're offering, and then to see them rewarded. So I just wanted to share that with you. It has really been a tremendous experience, and it's terrific to see these veterans be able to go in different directions and be able to realize some goals.
Thank you, Ms. Ramswell. That sounds pretty neat. Mr. Dixon.
Nothing tonight, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Overdeer.
Nothing tonight.
Mr. Marlar.
I wish I could say that. I just have a couple of quick issues. I'm really not trying to debate anything tonight. I just want to bring this out so the council can think about it. Over our wonderful subtropical storm, I'm still trying to wrap my head around that phrase because, I've never heard that one before. One of the things, and I had talked to Commissioner Wines as a member of the boating community, when they issue the warnings that vessels and any floating structures need to be put in safe harbor, an incident happened that a gentleman put his vessel or his barge in safe harbor and was later issued a notice to appear because he violated our ordinance. And the city manager, unfortunately, she can't do anything about that without our permission. The basic thing is that during a natural disaster, Mr. Burns has advised me that the city manager does have the authority to suspend ordinances and stuff, but we didn't put a provision in that particular ordinance for non-motorized floating structures. I think in good Samaritan sense that we should look at that in the near future to be fair and honest with everybody. I mean, I know that everybody's got their problems with the floating barges and stuff and Crab Island, but that was just, several boat captains even came to me and said that was just, we should never do something like that. I mean, that's their livelihood, just like if one of the boats got destroyed, because that also had the question brought to me, and I did bring it to Ms. Lejeune's attention that some of the boat captains were wondering if they had to have a safe harbor in Joe's Bayou, would they be able to put their boats in Joe's Bayou? Because we've made certain rules. So all I'm saying is we need to try to clarify or at least make a provision for natural disasters such as tropical storms, subtropical storms, hurricanes, that is fair to everyone in a particular case. I'm not saying that the person was right or wrong. I'm just saying that we just need to come up with something that the city manager has in her authority to do something to be a good Samaritan about it. And the other incident is well, I was going to bring up something else about Crab Island, but I'll hold that off for another debate. But that's where I would just like to go right now, is that no matter whether it's on Crab Island or anywhere, because a couple of citizens came to me and said, why didn't the barges that were moored in the harbor get the same treatment that the gentleman got in the in the bayou? And Mr. Burns answered one of the questions that I had asked before, which was whether Marlar Bayou was now private or was now technically a sovereign state, and I believe everybody's got that one. So I know that one's going to be a burn on some people in that area. But anyway, that's just for y'all's consideration. I'm not going to try to beat the dead horse tonight. I just think y'all should think about contingency for natural disasters. Thank you.
Is that
junk wasn't there, wouldn't need it.
Hold on, Mr. Dixon. Would you like to add that as an agenda item on our next meeting?
Yes, I would, please.
Okay, City Manager?
I'll be happy to put it on there, sir. I'm just not, I'm unclear as to what the actual discussion is, because as I was conferring with Mr. Burns, our city attorney, it's clear in the code that I do have the authority to make those decisions. And I made the decision to have the Crab Island floating structure removed from Marlar Bayou based on a complaint of a neighbor, a resident right next to it, who was afraid that there was going to be damage to his property. The ones that were in the East Pass seemed to be far enough away from any other property or vessels as to not to cause an issue. But we did issue we asked the Marine unit to go out and deal with that for us per our city code, because I received a complaint from a property owner that felt that there was imminent damage to their property.
Okay, Jeff, would it be out of order if Mr. Marlar talks with the city manager between now and the next meeting and come up with an idea or solution, or do you want to?
No, if Mr. Marlar wants to put a presentation together, he by all means can talk to Mr.
I will
Lejeune.
see what I can do.
Okay, thank you
All
very
right.
much. Is that good? That's it. Mr. Destin?
Nothing tonight, Mayor.
Mr. Morgan?
I think most of the council probably got the email from Crease about the letter being sent to DBPR. Yeah, and I had just given Crease a couple of suggestions on the letter, and I just want to make sure it's good with the council.
I haven't sent that out yet, sir. We're working on the revisions, strengthening the language that you had suggested. I didn't have a chance to send it out to council today, but tomorrow morning, we'll be sending the revised letter out for everyone to review before it becomes officially signed.
Sure, that'd be great.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks.
Mr. Burns?
I have nothing tonight.
Nothing either, thank you.
Nothing here. I make a motion to adjourn.
Hit the gavel. Hey, not bad.